Ali Khamenei is dead. The man who held the title of Wali Faqih, guardian jurist, Supreme Leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, for 35 years, who outlasted 7 U.S. presidents, who survived assassination attempts and wars and revolutions and the slow erosion of everything his mentor Khomeini built, is gone. The confirmation came at 23:51 local Tehran time. By midnight, every intelligence service in the world had the report. By 00:15, the first diplomatic cables had gone out from Washington, Tel Aviv, Riyadh, and Moscow. By 00:45, the Strait of Hormuz was already being re-evaluated as a risk corridor by every maritime insurer on Earth. And in Tehran, on the streets, there was nothing. Silence. A city of 9 million people going completely, utterly still. B-roll, empty Tehran highways at night. Traffic lights cycling with no vehicles. IRGC headquarters compound. Every window illuminated, vehicles moving. Iranian state television anchor at desk, visibly composing themselves. Cut back to host. I want you to understand what that silence means. In 1989, when Ayatollah Khomeini died, the streets of Tehran were not silent. They were overwhelmed. Millions of people in a wave of grief so intense that the funeral procession collapsed under its own weight, and the body had to be airlifted by helicopter. The grief was real, and it was total. Tonight is different. Tonight, the silence is not grief. It is calculation. It is 9 million people trying to answer the same question simultaneously. Who is in charge right now? Nobody knows. And that uncertainty, that gap between the death of one authority and the establishment of another, is the most dangerous window in the Islamic Republic's history. Because into that gap, every faction with power, every institution with weapons, every commander with ambition is now moving, simultaneously, without coordination, without a referee. Cut to graphic, Iranian power structure diagram, Supreme Leader box at top, now shown with a red X, lines to subordinate institutions hanging broken, each box isolated. This is the architecture of a state in crisis, not collapse. Iran is too institutionally robust for immediate collapse, but freefall toward a new configuration, whose shape nobody can predict in the first hours after the confirmation. Let me tell you what is happening right now in the rooms that matter. At IRGC headquarters in the Lavazan district, the commander and his senior staff have been in continuous session since the moment the medical confirmation came through. They are not mourning, they are planning. The IRGC has contingency frameworks for exactly this scenario, the death of the Supreme Leader, and those frameworks are now being activated in real time. The question is not whether the IRGC has a plan. The question is which plan, and who within the IRGC's senior leadership has the institutional weight to impose it. In the president's office, Masoud Pezeshkian's constitutional lawyers are working through the night. Pezeshkian, the reform-aligned president who came to office on a platform of diplomatic engagement and economic normalization, finds himself in the most constitutionally ambiguous position any Iranian president has ever occupied. He is technically the senior civilian official of the state. He has no authority over the IRGC. He has no authority over the succession. In the current moment, he is the most senior government official in Iran who has the least ability to determine what the country does next. In Qom, the theological capital of Shia Islam, the senior clerics of the Hausa, the great seminaries that have produced every major religious figure in the Islamic Republic, are an emergency conclave. The Assembly of Experts, whose constitutional function is to select the next supreme leader, is dominated by clerics with deep Qom roots. What they decide in the next 24 to 72 hours will either provide a legitimate successor to Khamenei's authority, or it will provide a rubber stamp for whoever the IRGC decides to impose. And in the proxy network, in Beirut, in Sana'a, in Baghdad, the commanders who have spent their careers taking orders from Tehran are discovering that the phone lines to their handlers have gone quiet. Not dead. Quiet. The people on the other end are still there. They just do not know what to say yet. Regional map, Tehran at center. Lines to proxy nodes flickering and unstable. Music tone shifts. This is the situation as of hour 1. It will evolve rapidly. And in the evolution of the next 72 hours, the Islamic Republic of Iran will either demonstrate that it is an institution capable of managing its own succession, or it will demonstrate that Ali Khamenei was not just its leader. He was its load-bearing wall. Tonight, we find out if the building still stands without him. Hard cut, title card power vacuum in Tehran. Sound sting. The power vacuum. Article 111 and the battle for legitimacy. Clinical studio lighting. Animated constitutional flowchart builds behind host. B-roll, Assembly of Experts building, Iranian constitutional text, Pezeshkian archive footage. To understand the crisis unfolding in Tehran tonight, you need to understand something that most Western analysis gets fundamentally wrong about the Islamic Republic. It is not a simple dictatorship. It is a complex, multi-institutional system built on a specific theological doctrine. And that complexity, which was designed to distribute power and prevent any single figure from dominating, is tonight its greatest vulnerability. Velayat-e-Faqih, the doctrine that built the Republic. The Islamic Republic of Iran was founded on a single revolutionary concept. Velayat-e-Faqih, the guardianship of the Islamic jurist. Developed by Ayatollah Khamenei in his 1970 lectures and embedded in the 1979 Constitution, this doctrine holds that in the absence of the hidden imam, the messianic figure in Shia theology who disappeared in 874 CE and will return to establish divine justice on earth, political and religious authority must be exercised by the most qualified Islamic jurist available. That jurist is the Supreme Leader, not a president, not a prime minister, not a constitutional monarch, a religious authority whose mandate derives not from popular election, but from theological qualification, and whose power extends over every institution of the state, including the military, the judiciary, the media, and the legislature. The Supreme Leader does not govern day to day. He sets direction. He arbitrates conflicts between institutions. He provides the theological legitimacy that holds the entire system together. Remove him, and you do not simply have a government without an executive. You have a theological system without its source of legitimacy. Every institution that derived its authority from his sanction is now operating in a kind of doctrinal limbo. Article 111. 3 paths. 1 crisis. Constitutional flowchart now fully animated. Article 111 text highlighted. 3 branching paths labeled A, B, C animate outward from the central succession question. Article 111 of the Constitution of the Islamic Republic provides the legal mechanism for succession. It specifies that upon the death of the Supreme Leader, the Assembly of Experts, the 88-member body of senior clerics constitutionally empowered to select and oversee the Supreme Leader, shall convene to identify and appoint a replacement as quickly as possible. If the Assembly cannot immediately identify a qualified successor, the article provides for the establishment of a leadership council, a body of 3 individuals who collectively exercise Supreme Leader authority on an interim basis. The 3 specified members are the President, the head of the Judiciary, and a cleric member of the Guardian Council selected by the Expediency Council. In the current configuration, that means President Masoud Pezeshkian, Judiciary Chief Gholam Hossein Mohseni-Ejei, and a Guardian Council conservative. This constitutional safety valve has never been used. Tonight may be its first test. Path A, the Assembly of Experts achieves rapid consensus on a successor. This requires one candidate to have sufficient theological credentials, sufficient political relationships, and, critically, sufficient IRGC support to be confirmed without prolonged debate. Path A is the best-case scenario for Iranian institutional stability. Path B. No consensus candidate exists. The Leadership Council is invoked. 3 individuals attempt to exercise collective Supreme Leader authority. The structural contradictions are immediate and severe. Pezeshkian is a reformist. Mohseni-Ejei is a hardliner with deep IRGC connections who has presided over the persecution of political dissidents. Their ability to function as a coherent governing body approaches 0. Path C. The constitutional mechanism fails. The Assembly deadlocks. The Leadership Council cannot function. The IRGC decides that waiting for a constitutional resolution is a luxury the security situation does not permit. It begins exercising de facto authority independent of any civilian or clerical framework. Not a coup in the conventional sense. The IRGC has always been careful to maintain the appearance of constitutional operation. But the effective end of civilian oversight over Iran's armed forces and strategic direction. Pezeshkian, the president without power, B-roll. Pezeshkian archive footage, campaign rallies, presidential inauguration, then graphic, split screen showing what the president controls versus what he does not. Masoud Pezeshkian became president of the Islamic Republic in July 2024, winning a runoff election on a platform of diplomatic engagement, nuclear deal resumption, and economic reform. He was the reform-aligned candidate, a cardiac surgeon turned politician from the Iranian Azerbaijani community with a genuine concern for ordinary Iranians suffering under sanctions and economic mismanagement. He won because the Iranian public, given a choice between a hardliner and a moderate, chose the moderate. That choice reflected a real and widespread preference for economic relief, reduced international isolation, and a government less consumed by revolutionary ideology. What Pezeshkian cannot do is translate that popular preference into strategic power in the current crisis. The Iranian president controls domestic policy, economic planning, and the diplomatic apparatus. He does not control the IRGC. He does not control the intelligence services. He does not control the succession process. He has no vote in the Assembly of Experts. He does not command a single soldier or control a single missile. In the current power vacuum, Pezeshkian is constitutionally positioned as a member of the potential Leadership Council, which gives him a formal role in the succession process, but he has no leverage to shape the outcome. The IRGC will not accept a leadership council that gives meaningful authority to a reformist president. The conservative clerical establishment will not empower Pezeshkian at a moment when they see an opportunity to consolidate revolutionary control. And the Iranian public, who voted for Pezeshkian hoping for change, may take to the streets if the succession produces a supreme leader who represents the opposite of everything they voted for. Pezeshkian is the most senior civilian in Iran tonight, and simultaneously the least relevant actor in the crisis playing out around him. The Provisional Leadership Council. Form without function. Watch for the announcement of the Provisional Leadership Council because its composition will tell you everything about whether the constitutional process is being respected or merely performed. If the council is announced and Pezeshkian is included as a genuine participant, if press briefings come jointly from the presidential palace and the judiciary, if the council issues substantive policy statements that reflect actual deliberation, then Path B is operational and Iran has a functioning, if imperfect, interim governance mechanism. If the council is announced but Pezeshkian is visibly marginalized, if substantive communications come exclusively from the judiciary and the IRGC-aligned Guardian Council representative, if presidential statements are delayed or filtered, then the council is theater. The IRGC has already made its decisions. The constitutional mechanism is a legitimizing wrapper around a power consolidation that has nothing to do with constitutional process. The difference between these two scenarios will be visible within 24 hours. Watch the press briefings. Watch who speaks first, who speaks longest, and whose statements set the agenda versus whose statements react to one already established by others. The IRGC consolidation. The Praetorian Guard moves. Cut to host. Lean forward. Harder energy. B-roll. IRGC parade footage, ballistic missile launches, Quds Force archive. Graphic. IRGC organizational chart with key figures. Music. More urgent militaristic undertone. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps was created in 1979 not as a conventional military force, but as a revolutionary vanguard, an ideological army whose primary loyalty was not to the Iranian state, but to the Islamic Revolution itself. In the 47 years since its founding, it has grown into something that has no precise parallel in any other country on earth. It is simultaneously a military force, an intelligence service, an economic empire, a political actor, and a theological institution. Its annual budget, much of which flows through opaque channels outside the official Iranian defense appropriation, is estimated in the tens of billions of dollars. It controls major sectors of the Iranian economy through a network of front companies, construction conglomerates, and import monopolies built over decades of preferential treatment and sanctions circumvention expertise. The IRGC fields 125,000 to 150,000 personnel across its ground, naval, and aerospace forces. It controls Iran's ballistic missile inventory, over 3,000 missiles, ranging from short-range battlefield weapons to medium-range systems capable of reaching Israel, Saudi Arabia, and every U.S. base in the region. It controls the drone warfare program that has transformed the military calculus of the entire Middle East. It controls the Quds Force, the external operations arm that manages the proxy network across the region. And in the current moment, it controls the only organized armed force in Iran that is capable of determining, through the application or threat of force, what the succession outcome will be. Ahmad Vahidi and the Hardline Command Profile Graphic. Ahmad Vahidi, photo, biographical summary, career timeline, threat assessment indicator. IRGC command chart animates showing factional alignment. Ahmad Vahidi is a name that carries enormous weight in Iran's revolutionary security establishment and almost no recognition in Western public discourse, which is precisely the kind of figure who shapes events in moments like this. Vahidi served as IRGC Quds Force commander in the 1990s, during the period when the Quds Force was developing its regional proxy architecture. He is wanted by Argentina in connection with the 1994 bombing of the Amaya Jewish Community Center in Buenos Aires, an attack attributed to Hezbollah with IRGC support that killed 85 people and injured hundreds more. He served as Iran's Minister of Defense from 2009 to 2013, during a period when the ballistic missile and nuclear programs made some of their most significant technical advances. He is one of the most ideologically hardline figures in the IRGC establishment, a true believer in the revolutionary project, who has spent his entire career building the instruments of Iranian regional power. In the current succession crisis, Vahidi represents the ideological center of gravity of the IRGC hardline faction, the faction that believes the Supreme Leader's death is not a crisis to be managed, but an opportunity to be seized. An opportunity to restructure the relationship between the IRGC and the clerical establishment in a way that gives the Revolutionary Guard permanent, institutionalized authority over the direction of the Islamic Republic. This faction does not want a supreme leader who will constrain the IRGC. It wants a supreme leader who will amplify it, who will provide religious legitimacy for the Guard's agenda while delegating actual strategic decisions to the military command. In effect, they want to invert the relationship between the clerical establishment and the IRGC that has defined the Islamic Republic since 1979, from a system where clerics govern and the Guard executes, to a system where the Guard governs and clerics legitimize, the Mojtaba Khamenei option. Profile graphic, Mojtaba. Khamenei, photo, background, clerical credentials assessment, political positioning, comparison chart, theological qualifications versus IRGC alignment scores. The most discussed name in the succession conversation, in both Iranian political circles and the intelligence services monitoring them, is Mojtaba Khamenei, the second son of Ali Khamenei. Mojtaba has spent his career in the shadows of his father's authority, building relationships within the IRGC and the hardline intelligence community without accumulating a public profile that would make him a visible target for reformist opposition. He is not a household name in Iran. He was not supposed to be. His influence has been exercised through back channels, through the management of his father's personal office, through the cultivation of relationships with IRGC commanders and Basij leadership that have taken decades to build. Mojtaba Khamenei is not, by the conventional criteria of Shia theological qualification, an obvious candidate for the position of Supreme Leader. The Valiye Faqih is supposed to be the most qualified Islamic jurist, a scholar of sufficient religious learning and moral authority to represent the hidden imam's authority on earth. Mojtaba holds the clerical rank of Hojatul Islam, one full level below the Ayatollah designation that his father held and that the position conventionally requires. His theological credentials are thin by any serious academic or religious measure. His qualifications as a political and intelligence operator, however, are considerably more developed. He understands the machinery of Iranian power in a way that a purely theological figure does not, and he represents, for the IRGC hardliners, the ideal outcome. A supreme leader with a Khamenei name and family continuity who owes his position to IRGC support and who will govern accordingly. The dynastic succession argument is not without precedent in the Islamic world, but it is deeply problematic within the specific theological framework of the Islamic Republic. The founding principle of Vilayat-e-Faqih was that clerical authority, not bloodline, determines political legitimacy. A Khamenei to Khamenei succession would represent a fundamental departure from that principle, a visible shift from theocracy towards something closer to a hereditary revolutionary dynasty, with the IRGC serving as the kingmakers. For the reform-aligned clergy in Qom, for Pezeshkian's political base, and for significant portions of the Iranian public who have watched the Islamic Republic drift from its founding ideals for decades, the Mojtaba Khamenei option is not a solution to the succession crisis. It is the crystallization of everything they have opposed, the final open acknowledgement that the Islamic Republic has become a vehicle for institutional power rather than a genuine theocratic state. How the IRGC consolidation works. Understanding how the IRGC executes a political consolidation requires understanding that it does not work primarily through direct coercion of clerical institutions. It works through a combination of information control, institutional positioning, and the selective application of pressure on individuals whose cooperation is needed. Step 1 is information control. The IRGC intelligence organization, which operates parallel to and often in competition with the Ministry of Intelligence, controls significant portions of the communications infrastructure that the assembly of experts and the political class rely on. In the immediate hours after the Supreme Leader's death, the IRGC's intelligence apparatus is managing the information environment, determining what reports reach which decision-makers, shaping the early narrative about the circumstances of the death, and creating the conditions for a particular succession outcome to appear inevitable before the formal process has even begun. Step 2 is institutional positioning. The IRGC has relationships, some built over decades of shared revolutionary experience, some built through financial patronage, some built through the implicit threat of consequences for non-cooperation, with specific members of the Assembly of Experts. Individual clerics who have received IRGC support and protection over the years are receiving very direct communications right now about the preferred succession outcome. This is not a conspiracy in the paranoid sense. It is institutional politics, conducted at high speed under crisis conditions, by an organization that has been preparing for this moment for years. Step 3 is the demonstration of force capability. The IRGC does not need to actually deploy force to shape the succession outcome. It needs only to make visible, through the movement of units, the activation of security perimeters, the presence of armed personnel in key locations, that it has the capacity to enforce its preferred outcome if the constitutional process does not deliver it. This is deterrence applied to domestic politics. The message to the Assembly of Experts is implicit but unmistakable. We would prefer that you reach the correct decision voluntarily. The clerical establishment in Qom understands this calculus perfectly. Many of its members have navigated IRGC pressure for decades. The question is whether enough of them, in the current crisis, are willing to assert the independence of the theological institution against the armed institution, knowing that the armed institution has guns and the theological institution has only arguments. History, in revolutionary states, does not favor the institution with only arguments. Axis fragmentation. The network without a nerve center. Regional map fills screen. Tehran glows at center. Lines pulse outward to Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthis in Yemen, PMF in Iraq, Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza. Then the Tehran node dims, lines flicker and destabilize. Music, dissonant, irregular. The axis of resistance was built on a single operational principle: centralized strategic direction, decentralized tactical execution. Tehran set the objectives, managed the escalation calendar, and provided the resources. The proxies executed, with considerable tactical autonomy, within the strategic framework Tehran provided. Remove Tehran's strategic direction, and the framework collapses. The tactical autonomy remains. The resources remain. The weapons remain. The ideological motivation remains. What is gone is the intelligence, the coordination, the calibration, the ability of a Hezbollah commander in Beirut to call a Quds force handler in Tehran and get a read on what level of escalation serves the current strategic moment. What is also gone is the restraint mechanism, the phone call that says, not yet, not this, stand down. Hezbollah. Grief, pressure, and the unguided missile map. Zoom, Lebanon, southern Lebanon border zone, Bekaa Valley storage areas, Beirut, southern suburbs. Overlay, estimated precision missile inventory, Israeli intercept coverage zones on the opposing side of the border. Hezbollah occupies the most paradoxical position in the axis of resistance. It is simultaneously the most powerful and the most internally conflicted of Iran's proxies. Its military capability is extraordinary. An estimated 150,000 to 200,000 rockets and missiles, including a growing inventory of precision-guided munitions capable of striking specific buildings in Tel Aviv with accuracy measured in meters. Anti-ship missiles capable of threatening Israeli naval vessels and commercial shipping in the eastern Mediterranean. Anti-armor systems upgraded significantly since their deployment in 2006. A tunnel network beneath southern Lebanon that is enormously difficult to destroy from the air. But Hezbollah's strategic calculus has always been disciplined by Iranian guidance that counseled patience. Preserve the arsenal, maintain deterrence, wait for the strategic moment when the full weight of Hezbollah's capabilities can be applied to maximum effect. Tonight, that counsel is unavailable. Inside Hezbollah, the pressure for action is real and has been building for months. The organization has absorbed significant leadership losses. Its rank-and-file fighters, many of whom joined specifically because of their devotion to the Islamic Revolutionary Project and its clerical leadership, are experiencing the death of the Supreme Leader as a profound personal and political shock. In a military organization built on ideological commitment, that kind of shock creates pressure for action as a form of affirmation. We are still here, we still resist, we have not been broken. The dangerous scenario is not a coordinated strategic decision by Hezbollah's political leadership to launch a major operation against Israel. Hezbollah's political wing understands the consequences. The physical survival of Lebanon as a functioning state and Hezbollah's own role within it are at stake. The dangerous scenario is a field commander in southern Lebanon, commanding a unit in a state of elevated readiness for months, making a local tactical decision, a rocket salvo, a cross-border raid, an ambush of an Israeli patrol that triggers an Israeli response escalating beyond anyone's intent or control. In military doctrine, this is called inadvertent escalation. It is how wars start that nobody decided to start. The Houthis and the Red Sea. The most immediate economic threat map, zoom, Yemen. Houthi territory in dark red. Red Sea shipping lanes as animated lines. Bab el-Mandeb labeled with 18-mile width measurement. Anti-ship missile range, circles from Houthi coastline. Suez Canal route versus Cape of Good Hope alternative cost comparison. Of all the actors in the axis of resistance, the Houthis present the most quantifiable threat to the global economy in the current moment. Not because they are the most militarily powerful, because they are the most operationally unconstrained, and because their theater of operations sits astride the most economically critical maritime corridor on Earth. The Bab el-Mandeb Strait, at the Gate of Tears, 18 miles wide between the Yemeni coast and Djibouti, is the southern entry point to the Red Sea and the Suez Canal route. Approximately 12 to 15% of global seaborne trade passes through it. Container ships between Asia and Europe rely on it. Crude oil from the Gulf heading to European refineries uses it. The alternative route around the Cape of Good Hope adds 10 to 14 days and up to $500,000 in additional fuel costs per voyage. The Houthis control the Yemeni coastline on the eastern shore of this strait. They have Iranian-supplied anti-ship ballistic missiles with ranges covering the entire Bab el-Mandeb and extending deep into the Red Sea. They have attack drone capabilities. They have demonstrated repeatedly against commercial vessels since 2023. They have shown both the will and the technical capability to disrupt shipping at scale. During their 2023 to 2025 Red Sea campaign, Iranian strategic guidance provided the Houthis with two critical services. First, intelligence. Iranian naval and satellite monitoring fed targeting information that allowed the Houthis to distinguish between vessels connected to their stated adversaries and purely civilian commercial ships. Second, calibration. Iranian handlers communicated when to escalate, when to pause, and when to accept diplomatic overtures, ensuring the campaign maintained strategic coherence rather than devolving into indiscriminate attacks. Both of those services are now disrupted. The Houthis have their own intelligence capabilities. Limited, but functional. They have their own command structure. What they do not have is the external calibration that previously told them where the line was between strategically useful pressure and counterproductive provocation that would generate overwhelming international military response. In the absence of that calibration, watch for Houthi activity in the Red Sea to intensify within 48 to 72 hours. Watch for attacks on vessels that would previously have been off the target list. Watch the maritime insurance market response. It will be faster and more honest than any diplomatic statement. When Red Sea corridor rates spike above their already elevated levels, the market has concluded that the threat has qualitatively increased. That data is your most reliable early warning indicator. The Iraqi PMF, closest to American forces. Map zoom, Iraq. PMF compound locations near Ain al-Assad Air Base in Anbar Province. U.S. facilities near Erbil. Distance measurement rings, 15 kilometers, 30 kilometers, 60 kilometers from U.S. positions. PMF drone range overlay. The Iraqi Popular Mobilization Forces present the most immediate physical threat to American military personnel anywhere in the region. The determining factor is geography. The distance between PMF rocket and drone launch positions and U.S. military facilities in Iraq is, in some cases, measured in single-digit kilometers. Warning time for an inbound rocket or drone attack is measured in seconds to minutes. U.S. force protection at these facilities is sophisticated. CRAM systems, electronic countermeasures, hardened shelters. But it is not perfect. Previous PMF attacks have resulted in American casualties. The PMF factions most likely to act are those whose operational ideology has always argued for maximum pressure on U.S. forces. Factions historically restrained by Iranian guidance that the strategic cost of killing Americans outweighed the political benefit. That guidance is no longer available from a unified Tehran. What replaces it, for the most radical PMF factions, is local political logic. The Supreme Leader is dead, the revolution is under threat, the Americans are in our country, and this is the moment to demonstrate that we have not been weakened. That logic points directly toward escalatory action. The U.S. military is not passive. Force protection posture at facilities across Iraq has already been elevated, but active defense is reactive. It responds to attacks already initiated. Preventing the decision to attack in the first place requires either deterrence or direct communication with PMF leadership, communication that the Iranian political vacuum makes extremely difficult to conduct through normal channels. 3 things to watch in the next 24 hours. Return to host. Wide shot. Studio lighting slightly warmer. The analytical energy of earlier segments settling into weight. Music near silence, single ambient tone sustaining. We have traced the full architecture of this crisis tonight. The constitutional void at the top, the IRGC moving to fill it, the proxy network fragmenting without its center, the global economy registering the risk in real time. Let me bring it to 3 precise points. 3 things to watch in the next 24 hours. 3 signals that will tell you whether this crisis resolves toward stability or whether it deepens into something the region has not seen before. Watch, item signal and significance. Before 1, the new leader announcement. A rapid announcement from the Assembly of Experts within 12 hours with joint IRGC endorsement signals. Path A, managed transition. An announcement of the Leadership Council without clear consensus signals. Path B, contested transition. The name matters as much as the speed. If the announced candidate is Mojtaba Khamenei or another figure with thin theological credentials but strong IRGC backing, expect immediate public opposition and potential protests in Tehran, Isfahan, and Mashhad within hours. 2. IRGC military movements. Watch for 3 specific signals. 1. Ballistic missile unit repositioning and open-source satellite imagery. This signals the IRGC is preparing an external demonstration of force. 2. Visible security deployments in Tehran, Qom, and major cities. This signals preparation for internal protest suppression. 3. Any movement of Quds Force personnel toward Iraq or Lebanon. This signals the proxy network is being recoordinated under direct IRGC command rather than through political channels. There are 3 internal protests. The street. This is the variable that IRGC cannot fully control. Iran has experienced 3 major protest waves since 2019. Each was suppressed, but each left deeper fractures in the regime's social legitimacy. A succession that is visibly managed by the IRGC rather than emerging from genuine clerical deliberation could trigger a 4th wave. If protests begin in university districts of Tehran within 24 hours, watch their scale and the security response. Violent suppression will be visible to the world. Restraint will signal that even the IRGC is uncertain how much force is appropriate. Hold on watch items graphic for 6 full seconds. Slow zoom back to host. Music descends to near silence. Single sustained note. Here is the historical frame for what we are witnessing. Every revolutionary state faces, eventually, the moment when it must survive the death of its founding generation. The Soviet Union faced it when Stalin died in 1953, and the succession crisis that followed reshaped the Cold War for a decade. China faced it after Mao and resolved it through years of factional conflict before a new equilibrium emerged under Deng. Cuba managed it through a carefully controlled dynastic transition from Fidel to Raúl with revolutionary institutions intact. The Islamic Republic is facing its version of that moment tonight. It has one factor those historical cases lacked: an armed institution, the IRGC, with the organizational coherence, the economic resources, and the ideological commitment to impose a particular outcome on the succession if the civilian and clerical institutions cannot manage it themselves. The question that Iranian history will ask about this night is, did the clerical institution, which gave the Islamic Republic its theological legitimacy, have enough independence and enough popular support to assert itself against the armed institution that has spent 40 years growing alongside it? Or did the armed institution finally, in the crisis moment, demonstrate that it is the actual sovereign power of the Islamic Republic, and that the clerical establishment, since 1979, has been its legitimizing theology rather than its governing authority? We do not know the answer yet. The answer is being determined right now in rooms in Tehran that no journalist has access to, between men whose names most of the world does not know, over the future of a country of 90 million people and a regional network of armed factions that hold the stability of the entire Middle East in their operational decisions. Pause 3 full seconds. Direct eye contact with camera. The power vacuum in Tehran will not remain a vacuum for long. Vacuums in revolutionary states are always filled. The only questions are, filled by whom, filled by what means, and at what cost to the country and the region that surrounds it. We will have more answers in 24 hours. We will be here when they come. Stay with us.